imprezy mamy dzisiaj?
Kluczy!
Pusta.
Napierdolę się.
I thought I knew everything about my best friend Rachel. We'd been inseparable since college, 23 years of shared secrets, late-night phone calls, and being each other's maid of honor. What I discovered on March 15, 2023, made me realize I'd been living next to a stranger who'd been systematically destroying my life for over a decade. It started with something as mundane as applying for a mortgage. My husband Jake and I had been saving for years to buy our first house in Brookside, a quiet suburb outside Sacramento. We'd found the perfect 3-bedroom on Maple Avenue, white picket fence, mature oak trees, the kind of neighborhood where kids still rode bikes until dark. At 34, I was finally ready to put down roots. I'd been meticulous about my finances since college. Credit cards paid off monthly, student loans tackled aggressively, emergency fund maintained religiously. Working as a senior marketing coordinator at Pacific Industries had given me a steady income of $68,000 a year, and Jake's job as an electrician brought in another $55,000. We'd saved a solid down payment, and were confident about our application. That Tuesday morning, I was sitting in Loan Officer David Martinez's office at Riverside Financial, expecting to sign paperwork and get our keys within 30 days. Instead, he slid a thick folder across his mahogany desk with the kind of expression doctors wear when delivering bad news. "Mrs. Thompson, we need to discuss some serious irregularities in your credit report," he said carefully, adjusting his glasses. "There are several accounts and incidents that don't match the financial picture you've presented to us." My stomach dropped like an elevator with cut cables. "What kind of irregularities?" He opened the folder, revealing page after page of credit reports. The papers seemed to multiply as he spread them across the desk, a paper trail of financial destruction I'd never seen before. Multiple late payments on credit cards you claim you don't have. A defaulted auto loan from 2019 for a Mercedes-Benz. 3 different addresses listed as your current residence, including an apartment complex in Phoenix that shows active utility bills in your name. There's also a store credit account at Nordstrom with a $15,000 limit that's currently maxed out. I stared at the documents, my hands beginning to shake as I tried to process what I was seeing. This is impossible. I've never lived in Phoenix. I drive a 2018 Honda Civic that's completely paid off. I haven't shopped at Nordstrom in years, and certainly not for $15,000. I'm afraid there's more," Martinez continued, his voice growing more serious. "Medical bills and collections from St. Mary's Hospital in Phoenix, totaling over $43,000. Multiple credit card accounts showing your social security number, opened over the past 8 years. And what's particularly concerning for our fraud investigation team, someone has been accessing your credit report regularly, always from the same IP address." The room felt like it was spinning. I gripped the arms of my chair, trying to anchor myself to something solid. 23 years of perfect credit destroyed. Jake and I had been planning this house purchase for 2 years, looking at properties every weekend, talking about which room would be the nursery when we were ready to start a family. Now we couldn't even qualify for a basic loan. "Can you trace where these inquiries are coming from?" I asked, my voice barely steady. Martinez nodded grimly, pulling out another document. "The IP address traces to a residential location here in Brookside. On Cedar Lane, specifically." The blood drained from my face so quickly I thought I might pass out. Cedar Lane was Rachel's street. She lived in the beautiful 2-story colonial just 4 blocks from our apartment, the house I'd always secretly envied with its perfect landscaping and expensive cars in the driveway. I somehow managed to drive home, though I don't remember the trip. Jake was in the kitchen making dinner when I walked in, and one look at my face told him everything had gone wrong. "The mortgage?" he asked immediately. I collapsed into a chair and told him everything. Jake's face went through a progression of emotions: confusion, disbelief, and finally rage. By the time I finished explaining, he was pacing the kitchen like a caged animal. "We're calling the police right now," he said, reaching for his phone. "This is identity theft, fraud, probably a dozen other felonies." "Wait," I said, though I couldn't explain why. Let me get more information first. I need to understand what's really happening. The next 3 days were the longest of my life. I called in sick to work and spent every waking hour pulling detailed credit reports from all 3 bureaus. What I found was worse than I'd imagined. The financial destruction had started in 2015, just 8 years into our friendship. Credit cards opened in my name with billing addresses in Phoenix, Las Vegas, Portland, and even one in Miami. Someone had been living an entire parallel life using my identity, and they'd been meticulous about it. The Phoenix apartment wasn't just a billing address, someone had actually lived there for 6 months in 2019, using my name on the lease. The utility bills, cable installation, even a gym membership at a high-end fitness center. Whoever was impersonating me had expensive tastes. I found applications for store credit at Bloomingdale's, Saks Fifth Avenue, and Williams-Sonoma. There were even attempts to open investment accounts at 2 different brokerages, though those had been flagged and denied by their fraud departments. But the most chilling discovery was the pattern of credit report pulls. Every few months for 8 years, someone had been checking my credit score and monitoring my accounts. They weren't just stealing from me randomly, they were tracking my financial life, making sure they stayed under the radar while systematically destroying my creditworthiness. The breaking point came when I realized I had to confront Rachel directly. I'd been trying to find alternative explanations, anything that would make sense without implicating my best friend. But the evidence was overwhelming, and that IP address on Cedar Lane wasn't going away. On Friday evening, I drove to Rachel's house. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was visiting the beautiful home that I now suspected had been partially financed by my stolen identity. The house sat on a perfectly manicured half-acre lot, with professional landscaping that probably cost more than my annual salary. Rachel's BMW X5 was in the driveway next to a Lexus I didn't recognize. I'd always wondered how Rachel afforded her lifestyle. She worked as a receptionist at Dr. Williams' dental office, making maybe $32,000 a year. Yet she lived in a house worth at least $400,000, drove luxury cars, and always seemed to have money for expensive vacations and designer clothes. I'd assumed she had family money or some inheritance she'd never mentioned. Now I was beginning to understand where her comfortable lifestyle really came from. Rachel answered the door with her usual bright smile, the same warm expression that had greeted me through countless happy occasions over the past 2 decades. "Sarah! What a wonderful surprise! Come in, I just opened a bottle of that Pinot Noir you love." I followed her into the living room, noticing details I'd somehow overlooked before. The furniture was all high-end, a leather sectional that probably cost $8,000, a coffee table that looked like something from a museum. Designer handbags were casually placed on chairs like they were everyday accessories, not investments worth thousands of dollars. "Rachel," I began, settling onto the couch and trying to keep my voice steady. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." Her smile faltered just slightly, like a mask slipping for a fraction of a second. "Of course, honey. What's wrong? You look upset." I pulled out the credit reports I'd printed, spreading them on her expensive coffee table. "Jake and I tried to get a mortgage this week. Our application was denied because my credit report shows accounts and debts I've never heard of. The credit bureau investigation traced the inquiries to an IP address on Cedar Lane." Rachel's face went through a series of micro-expressions: surprise, calculation, and something that might have been panic before settling back into concerned friendship. "That's absolutely terrible, Sarah. Identity theft is becoming so common these days. Have you filed a police report yet? I can go with you if you want moral support." The casual way she offered to accompany me to report crimes she'd committed was almost more shocking than the theft itself. I watched her carefully, looking for tells I'd somehow missed over 23 years of friendship. "The thing is, Rachel, this isn't random identity theft. Someone has been systematically using my information for 8 years. Someone who knows my social security number, my mother's maiden name, my employment history, all my personal details. Someone I've trusted with every aspect of my life." The silence stretched between us for what felt like hours. Rachel's hands were trembling slightly as she reached for her wine glass, though she tried to hide it by immediately taking a sip. I don't know what you're implying, Sarah, she said quietly, her voice lacking its usual warmth. I'm not implying anything. I'm asking directly. Have you been using my identity to open credit accounts and live a lifestyle you can't afford? For a moment, I thought she might continue denying it. But then something shifted in her expression, like she'd made a decision. The warm, caring look I'd known for over 2 decades was replaced by something cold and calculating that I'd never seen before. You have everything, she said, her voice barely above a whisper but carrying a weight of years of hidden resentment. Perfect job with your fancy marketing position, perfect husband who adores you, perfect life handed to you on a silver platter. Do you have any idea what it's like to watch someone else get everything you deserve? My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. After all these years, she was actually admitting it. So you decided to steal my identity? To ruin my credit and use my name to fund the lifestyle you felt entitled to? I didn't ruin anything. Rachel snapped, suddenly defensive and animated. I made the minimum payments for years. I was careful about it. It's not my fault some of the cards had variable interest rates that got out of control, or that medical bills are impossible to predict. The casual way she discussed destroying my financial life was almost more shocking than the confession itself. This wasn't a moment of weakness or a desperate mistake made in crisis. This was a calculated, years-long betrayal by someone I trusted more than anyone except my husband. Rachel, you've completely destroyed my financial life. Jake and I can't buy a house now. We probably can't even rent a decent apartment with my credit this damaged. Do you understand what you've done to us? She actually shrugged, a dismissive gesture that made my blood boil. You'll figure it out. You always do. You're the one with the charmed life, remember? The one everything always works out for. I stood up on shaking legs, grabbing the credit reports from her table. I'm going to the police. This is identity theft, fraud, probably a dozen felonies. Go ahead, Rachel said, her voice now openly hostile in a way that revealed depths of resentment I'd never suspected. But proving it will be complicated. I've been very careful about covering my tracks. And think about what this will do to both our reputations when it comes out. Everyone will know that Sarah Thompson was stupid enough to let her best friend steal her identity for 8 years without even noticing. The cruelty in her voice was like a physical blow. This person who'd been my maid of honor, who I'd confided my deepest fears and dreams to, who I'd considered closer than family, was threatening me to keep quiet about her crimes. How long have you hated me? I asked, the question escaping before I could stop it. Rachel's laugh was bitter. I never hated you, Sarah. I hated your life. I hated that you got the opportunities, the breaks, the easy path. Do you know I applied for your job at Pacific Industries 2 years before you did? They didn't even call me for an interview. But you waltz in and get hired immediately because you knew someone who knew someone. That's not how it happened. Isn't it? Your college roommate's boyfriend's cousin worked in HR. You mentioned it at that party, remember? How everything just falls into place for you. I did remember that conversation, though I'd forgotten about the connection until she mentioned it. But using it to justify 8 years of systematic fraud was insane. I walked out of that house and drove straight to the Brookside Police Department. Detective Jennifer Martinez took my statement in a small, windowless room that smelled like burnt coffee and disinfectant. She listened carefully as I explained the situation, occasionally asking for clarification about dates or amounts. Identity theft cases involving someone with intimate knowledge of the victim are actually some of our most complex investigations, she explained. But they're also some of our strongest when we can prove intent and pattern. The electronic trail you've described gives us a lot to work with. Over the next 2 weeks, the full scope of Rachel's deception emerged. Working with the credit card companies and the IP address logs, Detective Martinez traced 17 different accounts opened using my identity. Rachel had even applied for a mortgage on a rental property in Phoenix, though that application had been denied due to inconsistencies in the employment verification. The medical bills were from cosmetic surgery she'd had done in Arizona, a breast augmentation and liposuction, with me listed as the patient and my insurance information used for the initial consultation billing. Detective Martinez estimated that Rachel had stolen over $127,000 using my identity over 8 years, funding a lifestyle completely beyond her means while systematically destroying my creditworthiness. But what haunted me most was the realization of how calculated and long-term her deception had been. This wasn't opportunistic crime, it was a carefully planned betrayal that had required studying me, learning my habits and personal information, and maintaining a friendship specifically to facilitate her fraud. I remembered all the times she'd been conveniently available when I received important mail, offering to check my apartment when Jake and I went out of town. The casual questions about my social security number when we were doing group bookings for vacations. Her insistence on handling paperwork when we'd gone apartment hunting together years ago. Every interaction I'd thought was friendship had actually been reconnaissance. The night before Rachel's arrest, she called me one last time. Her voice was different, not the warm, familiar tone I'd known for 23 years, but something bitter and resentful that I realized had probably always been there, hidden beneath the surface. "I hope you understand that this ruins both our lives," she said without preamble. "Not just mine. You already ruined my life, Rachel. I'm just trying to get it back. You don't get it," she continued, her voice gaining intensity. "You've always had everything handed to you. Perfect grades because you could afford tutoring. Perfect job because of your connections. Perfect husband who fell for your act. I had to work for everything, fight for every opportunity. I deserved those chances just as much as you did." The depth of her resentment was staggering. 23 years of what I thought was genuine friendship, and she'd apparently harbored this level of hatred the entire time. Rachel was arrested on April 3, 2023, and charged with multiple counts of identity theft, credit card fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit fraud. Detective Martinez told me the case was unusually strong because of the extensive electronic trail and the fact that Rachel had confessed during our confrontation, which I'd been smart enough to record on my phone. The legal process would take months, maybe years. Rebuilding my credit would take even longer. The credit reporting agencies had promised to investigate and remove fraudulent accounts, but the process was bureaucratic and slow. Jake and I would have to postpone buying a house indefinitely. But what really kept me awake at night was a more disturbing question. If Rachel had been capable of this level of systematic deception and betrayal, what else was she capable of? And more importantly, after 23 years of being completely fooled by someone I trusted implicitly, how could I ever trust my judgment about people again? Have you ever discovered something shocking about someone you've known for years? How well do you think you really know your closest friends? What red flags might you have ignored that seem obvious in hindsight? What I didn't know was that my lawyer would soon discover Rachel's financial crimes were just the beginning of a much darker pattern of behavior that stretched back to our college days. 3 weeks after Rachel's arrest, I thought the worst was behind us. The identity theft case was moving through the legal system, and Jake and I were slowly rebuilding our financial lives. Then my lawyer, Patricia Chin, called with news that made everything infinitely worse. "Sarah, we need to meet immediately," she said, her usually calm voice tight with concern. "I've discovered something during the asset seizure at Rachel's house that you need to see. Can you come to my office this afternoon?" By 3 p.m. on April 24, 2023, I was sitting across from Patricia in her downtown Sacramento law office, watching her unlock a large evidence box with hands that seemed unusually unsteady. "The police found this in Rachel's home office during the search warrant execution," Patricia explained, pulling out a thick stack of papers bound with rubber bands. "It's a manuscript. A book. About you." My blood turned to ice water. "What do you mean, about me?" Patricia spread the pages across her conference table, and I saw my name written in Rachel's familiar handwriting across what must have been 300 pages of detailed documentation. The title page read, "The Perfect Life, A Study in Deception," by Rachel Henderson. Sarah, this isn't just some creative writing project, Patricia continued, her voice growing more serious. This is a comprehensive documentation of your entire life for the past 23 years. Daily routines, personal conversations, private moments, relationship details, medical information, family secrets, everything. I picked up the first few pages with trembling hands. The opening chapter was titled, First Contact, The Art of Friendship Infiltration, and described our initial meeting in college with the clinical detachment of a researcher studying a laboratory specimen. Subject exhibits classic patterns of privileged background, confident social interaction, expensive casual clothing, iPhone model always current. Vulnerability detected through observation of study habits and test anxiety. Initial friendship approach through academic assistance proved highly effective. She's been studying me, I whispered, horror creeping up my spine. Like I was some kind of experiment. Keep reading, Patricia said grimly. It gets much worse. Chapter after chapter detailed our friendship with frightening precision. Rachel had documented my class schedules, work routines, social interactions, and personal relationships with the thoroughness of a private investigator. She'd recorded conversations I'd forgotten we'd ever had, noting my reactions to different situations and what she called my behavioral patterns. But it wasn't just observation, it was analysis. Rachel had written detailed psychological profiles about my motivations, insecurities, and decision-making processes. She'd identified what she termed my manipulation points, topics and approaches that would make me most likely to trust her or share personal information. Subject responds favorably to perceived vulnerability in others. Expressing financial stress or relationship difficulties triggers immediate supportive response and information sharing. This weakness has been consistently exploitable throughout the relationship duration. I felt sick reading about myself described like a psychology textbook case study. Every intimate conversation we'd had, every moment I'd thought we were bonding as friends, had been carefully catalogued and analyzed for Rachel's benefit. Look at Chapter 7, Patricia said, pointing to a section titled, Information Acquisition and Asset Development. This chapter detailed how Rachel had systematically gathered my personal information over the years. She'd photographed my driver's license when I'd left my purse unattended. She'd memorized my social security number by watching me fill out forms. She'd even recorded some of our phone conversations, noting when I'd mentioned financial details or personal information she could later exploit. Subject's trusting nature makes information gathering remarkably efficient. Simple requests for emergency contact information or vacation house sitting arrangements provide access to passwords, security codes, and financial account details. Subject consistently fails to recognize security risks and casual information sharing. But the most disturbing section came in Chapter 12. Long-term behavioral documentation and life pattern analysis. Rachel had been tracking my movements, relationships, and major life decisions with frightening detail. She knew what time I left for work each morning and which route I took. She documented my exercise schedule, grocery shopping patterns, and medical appointments. She'd even noted when Jake and I had been trying to get pregnant 2 years ago, tracking my fertility clinic visits and medication schedules through observation and casual questioning. Subject's predictable routine patterns indicate high susceptibility to long-term monitoring. Consistent coffee shop visits every Tuesday at 7:15 a.m. provide regular surveillance opportunities. Subject's tendency to overshare medical information during routine conversations has yielded comprehensive health data over time. Patricia, she's been stalking me for over 20 years, I said, my voice barely steady. This isn't just identity theft, she's been documenting my entire existence. There's more, Patricia replied, flipping to a section near the end. Look at Chapter 18, Future Planning and Asset Maximization. This chapter outlined Rachel's long-term plans for exploiting our friendship. She'd been preparing to escalate her identity theft, with detailed plans for opening business credit lines in my name and possibly even applying for a mortgage on a rental property using my financial information. But most chilling was her discussion of what she called life replacement strategies. Rachel had been studying my relationship with Jake, noting our communication patterns and relationship dynamics with the apparent goal of somehow inserting herself more permanently into my life. Subject's marriage exhibits standard stress points that could be exploitable during economic pressure periods. Financial strain from credit issues should create sufficient relationship tension to allow for increased dependence on external support systems. Positioning as primary emotional support during marital difficulties could yield significant long-term benefits. She was planning to destroy my marriage, I realized with growing horror. The identity theft wasn't just about money, she was trying to create enough financial stress to break up Jake and me. Patricia nodded grimly. And look at this section about your job. Rachel had been documenting my work performance, noting my projects and client relationships with the detail of someone preparing to impersonate me professionally. She'd even researched my company's internal procedures and promotion criteria, apparently planning to somehow leverage her knowledge of my career for her own benefit. The manuscript included photographs, hundreds of them. Pictures of me at work, leaving my apartment, shopping for groceries, meeting friends for coffee. Some were clearly taken from a distance with a telephoto lens. Others looked like they'd been taken from hiding spots near my usual locations. How long has she been following me? I asked, staring at a photo of myself from what appeared to be last Christmas, coming out of the mall with shopping bags. Based on the metadata on these digital files, at least 8 years. But the written documentation suggests she's been observing and recording your behavior since college. I flipped through more pages, finding detailed floor plans of every apartment Jake and I had lived in. Rachel had somehow gained access to our homes and documented the layout, noting where we kept important documents, our daily routines, and what she called security vulnerabilities. Subject consistently leaves spare key under flower pot despite security recommendations. Apartment layout allows for easy document access during routine house-sitting arrangements. Subject's trusting nature regarding key access has facilitated multiple data gathering opportunities. She's been in our homes when we weren't there, I said, feeling violated in a way that went beyond financial fraud. She's been going through our personal belongings, photographing our documents, studying how we live. But the most disturbing discovery was in the final chapters. Rachel had begun planning what she called the final phase, a complete identity takeover that would involve not just using my financial information, but actually attempting to replace me in various aspects of my life. She'd researched how to obtain duplicate driver's licenses and identification documents. She'd been planning to contact my employer and claim I was having personal problems that might affect my work performance. She'd even outlined strategies for gradually poisoning my relationships with other friends and family members by sharing twisted versions of private information she'd gathered. Complete social isolation of subject will require approximately 18 to 24 months of systematic relationship sabotage. Subject's dependence on external validation makes this process highly feasible through strategic information sharing and behavioral manipulation of subject's social network. Patricia, this is a detailed plan for stealing my entire life, I said, my hands shaking as I read. She wasn't just committing financial fraud, she was planning to replace me. The lawyer nodded gravely. The district attorney is considering additional charges: stalking, criminal surveillance, conspiracy to commit fraud, possibly even attempted identity replacement, which could fall under impersonation statutes. As I continued reading, I found sections detailing Rachel's psychological state and motivations. Her resentment toward me went far deeper than I'd understood during our confrontation. She'd convinced herself that I'd stolen the life that rightfully belonged to her, and that taking my identity was simply reclaiming what she deserved. Subjects, unearned advantages, family connections, educational opportunities, social privilege represent systematic theft of resources that should have been distributed based on merit rather than circumstance. Correcting this imbalance through strategic asset reallocation is not only justified but morally imperative. But what terrified me most was reading about how she'd been manipulating me throughout our entire friendship. Every piece of advice she'd given me, every shoulder to cry on, every supportive conversation had been calculated to gather information or maintain her access to my life. She'd encouraged me to trust her with personal details by sharing what I now realized were fabricated vulnerabilities of her own. She'd systematically identified and reinforced my insecurities to make me more dependent on her friendship. She'd even influenced some of my major life decisions by providing carefully crafted advice designed to serve her long-term surveillance goals. Subject's career decision to remain in Sacramento rather than accept Los Angeles position was successfully influenced through discussions emphasizing relationship stability and cost of living concerns. Maintaining subject in current geographic location essential for continued monitoring and access. I remembered that conversation. 3 years ago, I'd been offered a significant promotion that would have required relocating to Los Angeles. Rachel had spent hours talking me through the decision, helping me weigh the pros and cons. Her insights had seemed so thoughtful and caring at the time. Now I realized she'd been manipulating me to stay where she could continue stalking me. How many of my life decisions has she influenced? I asked Patricia, feeling like everything I thought I knew about my own choices was crumbling. Based on this documentation, potentially most of them over the past decade. Patricia replied. She's been operating as a long-term behavioral influencer, using her intimate knowledge of your psychology to guide your decisions in directions that served her purposes. The manuscript even included detailed analysis of my relationship with Jake, noting our communication patterns, arguing styles, and what Rachel called pressure points that could be exploited to create marital stress. She'd been subtly encouraging conflict between us by asking leading questions about our relationship and then expressing concern about issues that she'd actually suggested I should worry about. She'd been positioning herself as a neutral sounding board while actually working to undermine my marriage. Sarah, there's one more thing, Patricia said, her voice becoming even more serious. The police found evidence that Rachel was planning to escalate her activities. There are recent entries discussing what she calls direct intervention strategies. I looked at the pages Patricia indicated, feeling my blood pressure spike as I read Rachel's plans for the next phase of her identity theft. She'd been preparing to contact my employer directly, claiming to be me and requesting changes to my direct deposit information. She'd been planning to intercept my mail by filing change of address forms. She'd even researched how to obtain duplicate medical records and possibly impersonate me at healthcare appointments. Subjects' predictable medical appointment patterns provide optimal impersonation opportunities. Routine gynecological and dental visits offer low-risk scenarios for practicing direct identity replacement. Success in medical impersonation could provide foundation for broader identity takeover initiatives. She was planning to show up at my doctor's appointments pretending to be me. I said, feeling nauseous. This goes so far beyond financial fraud. The final entry in the manuscript was dated just 2 weeks before my credit report discovery, right around the time Rachel and I had last spoken before the mortgage application revealed her crimes. Subject appears unaware of credit complications despite recent financial inquiries. Timeline for final phase implementation remains viable. Recommend accelerating asset extraction before potential discovery. Subject's continued trust provides optimal conditions for completing identity transfer process. Reading those words, I realized how close I'd come to something even worse than what had already happened. If I hadn't tried to buy that house, if the mortgage application hadn't revealed the credit problems, Rachel might have successfully completed her plan to essentially steal my entire life. As I sat in Patricia's office, surrounded by hundreds of pages documenting my unknowing surveillance, I felt a horror that went beyond the financial crimes. This wasn't just identity theft, it was a decades-long stalking campaign disguised as friendship. Every memory I had of our relationship was now tainted with the knowledge that Rachel had been studying me, documenting me, planning to replace me. 23 years of what I'd thought was genuine friendship had actually been an elaborate long-term crime in progress. What happens now? I asked Patricia, feeling like my entire understanding of my own life had been shattered. We're turning all of this over to the FBI, she replied. This level of stalking and identity theft crosses state lines and involves federal crimes. But Sarah, you need to understand this investigation is going to take years. And Rachel's surveillance of you was so comprehensive that rebuilding your privacy and security is going to be an enormous challenge. As I drove home that evening, I couldn't stop thinking about all the times Rachel had been there for me during difficult moments, all the advice she'd given me, all the support she'd provided during challenges. Now I knew that every gesture of friendship had been carefully calculated, every act of support designed to maintain her access to my life for surveillance purposes. How do you recover from learning that your closest friendship was actually a 23-year stalking campaign? How do you rebuild trust in your own judgment when you've been so completely deceived for so long? And most terrifying of all, if Rachel had been planning to replace me entirely, what would have happened to me once she no longer needed to maintain the pretense of friendship? Have you ever felt like someone was watching you or documenting your life? How well do you think you know the people who have access to your daily routines and personal information? What would you do if you discovered someone had been systematically studying and recording your life for years? What I was about to discover was that the manuscript was just the beginning. Rachel's obsession with my life had led her to recruit others, and I wasn't her only victim. The FBI investigation into Rachel's surveillance had been ongoing for 6 weeks when Agent Michelle Rodriguez called me with news that made my blood run cold. It was June 8, 2023, and I thought we'd uncovered the full extent of Rachel's obsession. I was wrong. "Sarah, we need you to come to the field office immediately," Agent Rodriguez said, her voice carrying a weight I'd learned to recognize as really bad news. "We've discovered that Rachel wasn't working alone. She had an accomplice, and what we found in this person's apartment is unprecedented." 2 hours later, I was sitting in the sterile conference room at the FBI's Sacramento field office, staring at evidence photos that made Rachel's manuscript look like amateur hour. Agent Rodriguez spread the images across the table with the careful precision of someone handling radioactive material. "Meet Jessica Walsh," she said, pointing to a photo of a young woman with shoulder-length brown hair and an unnaturally bright smile. 26 years old, works part-time at a photography studio in Woodland. Rachel recruited her approximately 4 years ago as what we can only describe as a surveillance assistant. I studied Jessica's face, trying to place her. She looked vaguely familiar, but I couldn't identify where I might have seen her. "Did I know her?" I asked. "Not directly, but she definitely knew you," Agent Rodriguez replied grimly. "Jessica has been what we call a dedicated follower. She became obsessed with your life through Rachel's influence, and that obsession escalated far beyond anything we initially expected." The agent pulled out a thick folder containing dozens of surveillance photos. "Jessica has been photographing you for 4 years. Not just occasionally, daily. She follows your routine religiously, documents your activities, and has created what can only be described as a shrine to your existence." The first photo showed me leaving my apartment on what appeared to be a recent Tuesday morning. The timestamp indicated 7:12 a.m. exactly when I left for work every day. The photo quality was professional grade, taken with expensive telephoto equipment. "She knows your schedule better than you do," Agent Rodriguez continued. "Coffee shop visits, grocery shopping, medical appointments, social activities. Jessica has been essentially living her life around documenting yours." I flipped through more photos, feeling increasingly violated. There were pictures of me at the gym, coming out of restaurants, talking to neighbors, even sitting in my car at red lights. Hundreds of images spanning 4 years, all taken without my knowledge or consent. How is this possible? How did I never notice someone following me constantly? "Jessica is very good at what she does," Agent Rodriguez explained. "She uses different vehicles, changes her appearance, and employs sophisticated surveillance techniques. But more importantly, Rachel trained her in your specific behavioral patterns. Jessica knew exactly where you'd be and when, so she could position herself for optimal documentation without being detected." The agent pulled out another set of evidence photos that made my stomach lurch. "This is Jessica's apartment. Specifically, what she calls her Sarah room." The images showed a bedroom completely covered with photographs of me. Every wall, ceiling to floor, was papered with surveillance photos spanning 4 years. It looked like the workspace of a serial killer from a crime show, except the victim was sitting right there in the FBI office, very much alive. There are over 3,000 photographs in that room, Agent Rodriguez said quietly. Jessica has been printing and organizing them chronologically, creating what amounts to a photographic biography of your life since 2019. But the photos were just the beginning. Jessica had created detailed charts tracking my routines, color-coded calendars marking my activities, and what appeared to be a comprehensive database of my behavioral patterns. She documented my clothing choices, meal preferences, social interactions, and even my emotional states based on her observations. She's been studying me like I'm some kind of celebrity, I said, feeling nauseous. Actually, it's more intense than celebrity obsession, Agent Rodriguez replied. Celebrity stalkers usually maintain some psychological distance from their targets. Jessica appears to believe she has a personal relationship with you. She's been living vicariously through your experiences and considering herself part of your life story. The agent showed me transcripts of text messages between Rachel and Jessica that revealed the depth of their collaboration. Rachel had been feeding Jessica detailed information about my personal life, emotions, and relationships, which Jessica then used to interpret and contextualize her surveillance observations. Rachel to Jessica, March 15, 2023. Sarah seemed stressed today about the mortgage application. Perfect opportunity to get photos of her emotional state. She'll probably go to Starbucks around 3 p.m., that's her stress response pattern. Jessica to Rachel, March 15, 2023. Got amazing shots of her looking worried. You can really see the concern in her expression. She's so authentic in her emotions, never fake or performative like other people. Will these help with your research? Research? I asked, looking up from the transcripts. Jessica believed she was helping Rachel with what Rachel described as a psychological study of you. Agent Rodriguez explained. Rachel convinced Jessica that you were an exceptional person worthy of detailed documentation and study. She made Jessica feel like she was contributing to something important by stalking you. The manipulation was staggering. Rachel had found a young, impressionable person and convinced her that obsessively stalking me was actually a form of scientific research or artistic documentation. I read more of their message exchanges, feeling increasingly disturbed by Jessica's language about me. Jessica to Rachel, April 2, 2023. Sarah looked so beautiful today in that blue dress. She has such natural elegance, the way she moves, the way she carries herself. I got some incredible photos of her at lunch. She's like a real-life work of art. Jessica to Rachel, April 10, 2023. I've been thinking about what you said about Sarah being representative of the ideal modern woman. Her life really is perfectly balanced: career success, stable relationship, genuine friendships. Documenting her journey feels like preserving something important for posterity. She thinks I'm some kind of inspiration or role model. I realized with growing horror. Rachel convinced this young woman that stalking me was actually some kind of educational or artistic project. Exactly. Agent Rodriguez confirmed. Jessica has been operating under the delusion that her surveillance serves a higher purpose. She believes she's documenting an exemplary life for the benefit of others who could learn from your example. The agent showed me more evidence from Jessica's apartment notebooks filled with detailed observations about my daily activities, written in the style of nature documentaries or anthropological studies. Subject maintains consistent morning routine: coffee preparation at 6:45 a.m., always using the same blue mug. This demonstrates admirable discipline and attention to personal rituals that create stability in modern life. Subject's commitment to routine provides excellent example of how successful people structure their days for optimal productivity. Observed subject interacting with elderly neighbor Mrs. Patterson. Subject consistently shows patience and genuine interest in conversation, never appearing rushed or dismissive despite obvious time constraints. This exemplifies ideal community engagement behaviors that others should emulate. She's been analyzing my most mundane activities like I'm some kind of lifestyle guru, I said, reading entry after entry of Jessica's observations. Taking out the trash, checking the mail, Walking to my car, she's documented and analyzed everything as if it has some deeper meaning. But the most disturbing discovery was Jessica's collection of what she called inspiration materials. She'd been purchasing items similar to my clothing, had changed her hairstyle to more closely resemble mine, and had even started shopping at the same stores I frequented. Jessica has been gradually reshaping her life to mirror yours, Agent Rodriguez explained. She's adopted your exercise routine, started drinking the same coffee, even applied for a marketing position at a company similar to yours. The evidence photos showed Jessica's closet filled with clothes nearly identical to items I owned. She'd been copying my style so precisely that seeing her wardrobe was like looking at a duplicate of my own closet. Agent Rodriguez, this goes beyond stalking, I said, studying the evidence. She's been trying to become me. We believe Jessica represents what psychologists call an identity-seeking stalker. The agent replied. Unlike Rachel, whose motivation was primarily exploitative, Jessica appears to genuinely admire you to an unhealthy degree. She wants to emulate your life because she believes you represent some kind of ideal existence. The investigation had revealed that Jessica spent most of her free time either following me or organizing and analyzing the documentation she'd collected. Her social media accounts were filled with cryptic references to someone she described as my inspiration and the perfect example of how to live. Jessica's Instagram post May 15, 2023. Watching someone who truly has their life together is so motivating. Some people just naturally make the right choices and create the perfect balance. #inspiration, #life goals, #authentic. Jessica's Facebook post May 22, 2023. There's something beautiful about witnessing genuine success and happiness in another person. When you find someone who represents your aspirations, studying their approach can teach you so much about living well. She's been posting about stalking me on social media? I asked, incredulous. She doesn't see it as stalking. Agent Rodriguez clarified. In Jessica's mind, she's been conducting what she calls lifestyle research on someone she considers a role model. Rachel encouraged this interpretation to maintain Jessica's cooperation. The agent showed me Jessica's journals, where she'd written elaborate analyses of my choices and their outcomes. She documented my relationship with Jake, noting what she considered exemplary communication patterns and relationship dynamics that she hoped to emulate in her own future relationships. Sarah and Jake's interaction patterns demonstrate ideal partnership balance. Sarah maintains independence while showing consistent support for Jake's goals. Their conflict resolution style is admirably mature. They discuss issues directly without passive-aggressive behavior. This relationship model should be studied by anyone seeking lasting partnership success. She's been analyzing my marriage like it's a case study, I said, feeling violated in a completely new way. But the most chilling discovery was Jessica's future planning documents. She'd been preparing to eventually approach me directly, believing that once she gathered enough observational data, she could initiate a friendship based on their shared values and compatible lifestyles. After 4 years of documentation, I understand Sarah's personality, interests, and social patterns well enough to predict compatibility for friendship development. Initial contact should emphasize shared interests in fitness, professional development, and community engagement. Her openness to helping others suggests she would be receptive to mentoring someone with similar aspirations. She was planning to befriend me. I realized with horror. After 4 years of stalking, she thought she knew me well enough to become my actual friend. Jessica had developed elaborate plans for inserting herself into your social circle. Agent Rodriguez confirmed. She'd identified mutual interests, researched your friends and family members, and prepared conversation topics based on her surveillance observations. She believed that because she'd studied you so thoroughly, a friendship would develop naturally. The investigation revealed that Jessica had been practicing conversations with me by talking to my photographs in her shrine room. She developed what psychologists call a parasocial relationship, a one-sided emotional connection where she felt close to me despite never having actually interacted with me. Agent Rodriguez showed me audio recordings found in Jessica's apartment, hours of Jessica talking to my photos as if we were having actual conversations. I saw you look tired today, Sarah. You've been working such long hours lately. You need to make sure you're taking care of yourself. I worry about you sometimes. You give so much to everyone else. That blue dress looked amazing on you yesterday. You have such great taste in clothes. I've been trying to develop my style to be more like yours, classic but current, professional but still feminine. She's been having imaginary conversations with me for years, I said, listening to the recordings with growing unease. She talks about me like we're close friends. Jessica appears to have genuine affection for you, but it's based entirely on her surveillance observations and Rachel's manipulative information. Agent Rodriguez explained. She's created an idealized version of you in her mind and developed real emotional attachment to that fantasy. The evidence also revealed that Jessica had been struggling with depression and social anxiety, making her particularly susceptible to Rachel's manipulation. Rachel had essentially provided Jessica with a purpose and a focus for her obsessive tendencies, channeling her mental health issues into elaborate surveillance activities. Rachel found someone vulnerable and turned her into a stalking accomplice, I said, beginning to understand the full scope of the manipulation. Exactly. Rachel exploited Jessica's insecurities and desire for purpose by convincing her that documenting your life was meaningful work. Jessica believed she was contributing to something important, when she was actually just enabling Rachel's criminal surveillance. But what disturbed me most was realizing how this had affected Jessica's own life. She'd essentially abandoned her own personal development to focus entirely on observing and analyzing mine. Her journals showed that she'd turned down social opportunities, avoided developing her own interests, and structured her entire existence around my schedule. Declined invitation to Emma's birthday party, conflicts with Sarah's usual Saturday morning gym routine. Maintaining consistent documentation schedule more important than social obligations that don't contribute to research goals. Cancel plans with family for Sunday brunch. Sarah often visits farmers market on Sunday mornings, can't miss opportunity for candid photos of her social interactions with vendors and community members. She sacrificed her own life to stalk mine, I realized with a mixture of horror and sadness. Rachel convinced this young woman to give up her own experiences to obsess over mine. Agent Rodriguez nodded grimly. Jessica has been living vicariously through you for 4 years. Her entire identity became centered around observing and emulating your life rather than developing her own. The investigation was ongoing, but Jessica had been arrested and was facing multiple charges including stalking, criminal surveillance, and conspiracy. Unlike Rachel, whose crimes were clearly motivated by greed and resentment, Jessica appeared to be genuinely mentally ill and manipulated into her criminal behavior. Will she go to prison? I asked, feeling conflicted about someone who seemed more victim than criminal. That will depend on her mental health evaluation and her cooperation with the investigation, Agent Rodriguez replied. Jessica's case is complicated because while her actions were criminal, her motivations appear to stem from manipulation and mental illness rather than malicious intent. As I left the FBI office that afternoon, I felt a new kind of violation. Rachel's identity theft and surveillance had been horrifying, but at least her motivations were comprehensible: greed, resentment, and exploitation. Jessica's obsession was harder to process because it came from a place of admiration and genuine emotional attachment. How do you recover from learning that someone has been lovingly stalking you for 4 years? How do you process the knowledge that a stranger has been living vicariously through your experiences, analyzing your choices, and planning to insert herself into your life based on years of secret observation? And most disturbing of all, if Jessica had successfully befriended me, would I have recognized the obsessive behavior, or would I have simply gained another close friend who seemed to understand me perfectly because she'd been studying me for years? Have you ever noticed someone who seemed to know you unusually well for a new acquaintance? How would you feel if you discovered someone had been documenting and analyzing your daily life for years? What would you do if you found out someone considered you their ideal role model based entirely on stalking? What I was about to learn was that Jessica's shrine was just the tip of the iceberg. Rachel had been recruiting multiple people, and my case was about to become part of something much larger and more terrifying. The FBI raids on Rachel and Jessica's properties had yielded more evidence than anyone anticipated, but it was Agent Rodriguez's phone call on June 30th, 2023, that made me question everything I thought I knew about my own home. "Sarah, we need you and Jake to evacuate your apartment immediately," she said, her voice carrying an urgency that made my hands shake. "Don't pack anything, don't touch anything, just leave right now and meet us at the field office. We've discovered something that requires immediate intervention." "What kind of something?" I asked, already grabbing my keys while Jake looked at me with alarm. "We have reason to believe someone has been living in your apartment without your knowledge. There may be an active intruder situation, and we need to secure the premises before conducting a full investigation." 2 hours later, Jake and I sat in the FBI conference room watching Agent Rodriguez set up a laptop with the kind of grim efficiency that meant we were about to see something that would change everything. Again. During our analysis of Jessica's surveillance equipment, we discovered something that initially didn't make sense. Agent Rodriguez began, opening a file folder thick with technical documentation. "Jessica's photos of you inside your apartment were too detailed, too intimate, and taken from angles that would be impossible from outside surveillance positions." She pulled up a series of photographs on her laptop screen. The images showed me in my kitchen making coffee, sitting on my couch watching television, even sleeping in my bedroom. The quality was crystal clear, with perfect lighting and close-up detail that made my stomach drop. "These weren't taken through Windows," I said, studying the angles and image quality. "Someone was inside our apartment when these were taken." "Exactly. Our technical team analyzed the metadata and determined these photos were captured using interior surveillance equipment. Professional-grade hidden cameras installed throughout your living space." Jake grabbed my hand, his face pale. "Someone's been watching us inside our own home?" Agent Rodriguez nodded gravely. "We obtained a search warrant for your apartment this morning. What we found is unprecedented in our experience with stalking cases." She pulled out a series of evidence photos showing our apartment from angles I'd never seen before. The images revealed tiny cameras hidden in smoke detectors, electrical outlets, light fixtures, and even inside picture frames. Nearly every room had multiple surveillance points providing comprehensive coverage of our daily activities. 12 cameras total, Agent Rodriguez continued, all connected to a wireless network that transmitted live feeds to an external location. Someone has been watching you in real time for approximately 3 years. 3 years? I felt like I might vomit. Someone's been watching us eat, sleep, have private conversations, intimate moments, for 3 years? Unfortunately, yes. But that's not the most disturbing part of what we discovered. Agent Rodriguez pulled out another set of evidence photos that made my brain struggle to process what I was seeing. The images showed a hidden space behind our bedroom wall, a cramped area approximately 6 feet by 8 feet, equipped with monitors, recording equipment, and what appeared to be basic living supplies. Someone constructed a hidden room behind your bedroom wall, Agent Rodriguez explained. They'd been living there intermittently, watching your daily activities through the hidden cameras and emerging when you weren't home. Jake's hand tightened on mine as the full horror of the situation sank in. You're telling us someone has been secretly living in our apartment? Like actually living there? Based on the evidence we've collected, yes. The hidden room contains food supplies, clothing, bedding, and personal hygiene items. Someone has been using your apartment as their primary residence while maintaining the illusion that you live alone. Agent Rodriguez showed us more photos of the hidden space. It looked like a combination surveillance center and minimalist living quarters. Multiple monitors displayed live feeds from the cameras throughout our apartment. A small refrigerator contained food, and there was even a chemical toilet concealed behind a partition. How is this possible? I asked, my voice barely steady. How could someone live in our apartment without us knowing? We would have heard them, seen signs, noticed something. The person responsible is extremely sophisticated in their surveillance techniques, Agent Rodriguez replied. They only occupied the space when you were both at work or away from home. They knew your schedules precisely and timed their presence to avoid detection. She pulled out detailed charts and schedules that made my blood run cold. Someone had been tracking our daily routines with military precision, noting exactly when we left for work, how long we were typically gone, and when we were most likely to be away from home for extended periods. They knew Jake works 10-hour shifts on Tuesdays and Thursdays. They knew you go to the gym every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday evening. They knew about your monthly business trips, your weekend visits to your parents, even your date nights and social activities. But who? I asked, though part of me was beginning to suspect the answer. Who could know our schedules that well? Agent Rodriguez opened another file, revealing surveillance photos that made everything click into place with horrifying clarity. The images showed a woman entering and leaving our apartment through what appeared to be a hidden entrance I'd never noticed. Meet Amanda Foster, Agent Rodriguez said, pointing to photos of a woman with dark hair and professional attire. 31 years old, works remotely as a freelance graphic designer. She's been Rachel's primary coordinator and the architect of the most sophisticated elements of your surveillance. I studied Amanda's face, trying to place her. She looked familiar, but I couldn't identify where I might have encountered her. Unlike Jessica, who was motivated by admiration, and Rachel, who was driven by resentment, Amanda appears to be motivated by something else entirely, a desire for complete life replacement. Agent Rodriguez explained that Amanda had been recruited by Rachel 2 years ago, but had quickly escalated beyond simple surveillance assistance. Amanda had convinced Rachel to help her gain access to our apartment, claiming she wanted to study my lifestyle more closely to better assist with the identity theft operation. In reality, Amanda had her own agenda. She wanted to literally live your life, not just observe it or steal from it. The evidence revealed that Amanda had been gradually moving into our apartment over the past year. She'd started by just hiding in the concealed room during the day, watching our activities through the cameras and learning our routines. But recently, she'd begun actually using our living space when we weren't home. She's been eating your food, using your shower, sleeping in your bed, even wearing your clothes, Agent Rodriguez said, showing us evidence photos that made me feel physically ill. When you're at work, Amanda emerges from the hidden room and lives as if the apartment belongs to her. Jake stood up abruptly, pacing to the window. This is insane. Someone's been living in our home, using our stuff, violating every aspect of our privacy, and we never knew. Agent Rodriguez pulled out more evidence photos of Amanda cooking in our kitchen, watching our television, going through our closets and personal belongings. In some images, she was wearing my clothes and jewelry, sitting in my favorite chair, even using my laptop. Amanda has been practicing being you, Agent Rodriguez explained. She's learned your daily routines so thoroughly that she can essentially live your life when you're not there to live it yourself. But the most disturbing evidence was video footage recovered from Amanda's recording equipment. Hours of surveillance showing Jake and me in our most private moments, conversations about work stress, discussions about our relationship, intimate moments we thought were completely private. She's been recording everything. I realized with growing horror. Our arguments, our personal conversations, our everything. Amanda has been studying your relationship dynamics, your communication patterns, your personal habits and preferences. She appears to have been preparing to eventually replace you entirely. Agent Rodriguez showed us transcripts of online communications between Amanda and Rachel that revealed the scope of Amanda's obsession. Unlike Rachel's resentment or Jessica's admiration, Amanda's motivation was complete identity replacement. Amanda to Rachel, May 20th, 2023. I understand Sarah's daily routine better than she does. I know exactly how she likes her coffee, which side of the bed she prefers, how she organizes her closet. I could live her life more efficiently than she does. Amanda to Rachel, June 5th, 2023. Jake wouldn't even notice if I replaced her gradually. I know all her mannerisms, her speech patterns, her preferences. I've been practicing being Sarah for months now. I'm better at being her than she is. The delusion in Amanda's messages was staggering. She'd convinced herself that through surveillance and study, she'd become more qualified to live my life than I was. Amanda believes she understands you better than you understand yourself. Agent Rodriguez explained. She thinks she's optimized your lifestyle and could live it more successfully than you do. The investigation revealed that Amanda had been gradually replacing items in our apartment with identical copies, taking our belongings to her own residence to study and replicate. She'd been building a complete duplicate of our living space in her own apartment, practicing being me in an environment she could control completely. She has a full replica of your bedroom, kitchen, and living room in her apartment. Agent Rodriguez said, showing us photos of Amanda's residence that looked like a disturbing mirror image of our home. She's been living parallel versions of your daily routine when you're at home. She's in her duplicate space, mimicking your activities. The evidence photos showed Amanda's apartment arranged exactly like ours, with identical furniture, matching decorations, and even the same books and magazines arranged in the same positions. It was like seeing a dollhouse version of our real home. She's been synchronizing her daily activities with yours. Agent Rodriguez continued. When you make coffee in the morning, she makes coffee in her replica kitchen. When you watch television in the evening, she watches the same shows in her duplicate living room. She's been living a shadow version of your life in real time. But the most chilling discovery was Amanda's planning documents for what she called the transition. She'd been preparing to gradually replace me in various aspects of my life, starting with professional contacts and eventually moving to personal relationships. Amanda's planning document, June 15, 2023. Sarah's coworkers know her primarily through email and phone communication. Initial replacement strategy should focus on remote work interaction where physical differences would be undetectable. Gradual introduction of new personality traits and preferences can be implemented over 6 to 8 months. Amanda's planning document, June 18, 2023. Jake's work schedule provides optimal replacement windows. Extended practice periods in primary residence have confirmed ability to maintain Sarah's household management patterns. Relationship replacement feasible within 12-month timeline. She was planning to replace me in my own life. I said, reading her detailed strategies for impersonating me at work, with friends, and eventually with my own husband. She thought she could gradually become me and no one would notice. Agent Rodriguez nodded grimly. Amanda had developed elaborate plans for identity replacement that went far beyond financial fraud. She wanted to literally take over your existence. The investigation revealed that Amanda had been testing her ability to impersonate me during phone calls with my work colleagues when I was sick or working from home. She'd been practicing my voice, studying my communication style, and gradually inserting herself into my professional interactions. Some of your recent work calls weren't actually with you, Agent Rodriguez said carefully. Amanda had been intercepting some of your business communications and responding as if she were you. The violation was so complete, so intimate, that I struggled to process it. Someone had been living in my home, wearing my clothes, eating my food, sleeping in my bed, and practicing being me with the goal of eventually replacing me entirely. How long before she would have tried to implement this plan? Jake asked, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. Based on her timeline documents, Amanda was planning to begin active replacement within the next few months. Agent Rodriguez replied. She believed she was ready to start phase 1 of taking over your identity. Amanda had been arrested during the raid on our apartment, hiding in the concealed room when FBI agents executed the search warrant. She'd been living there full-time for the past 2 weeks, emerging only when we were at work to use our shower, kitchen, and other facilities. She was essentially squatting in our home while we lived there. I said, feeling violated in a way I didn't have words for. She was our secret roommate, watching us, studying us, preparing to replace us. The evidence collection from our apartment took 3 days. Every surface had to be processed for DNA evidence, every item examined for tampering or replacement. The FBI found that Amanda had been gradually substituting our belongings with identical copies, taking our personal items to study and replicate for her own use. We found duplicates of your jewelry, clothing, even personal photographs in Amanda's residence. Agent Rodriguez explained. She'd been building a complete inventory of your personal belongings and learning to replicate your style perfectly. But perhaps most disturbing was the discovery that Amanda had been documenting what she considered improvements to my life. She'd been keeping detailed notes about ways she thought she could live my life more efficiently, more successfully, more optimally than I did. Amanda's improvement notes. Sarah wastes approximately 15 minutes every morning deciding what to wear. Pre-planning weekly outfits would improve morning routine efficiency. Sarah's meal prep could be optimized to save 30 minutes daily. Sarah's workout routine lacks consistency. Implementing structured schedule would improve fitness outcomes. She thought she could be a better version of me than I am. I realized, reading her critiques of my lifestyle choices. She was planning to replace me with what she considered an improved version. As we sat in that FBI conference room, surrounded by evidence of the most intimate violation imaginable, I realized that Rachel's conspiracy had evolved far beyond simple identity theft. She'd assembled a network of people with different but complementary obsessions: Jessica's admiration, Rachel's resentment, and Amanda's desire for complete replacement. Together, they'd created the most comprehensive surveillance and identity theft operation the FBI had encountered, with me as the unwitting center of their elaborate criminal conspiracy. How do you recover from learning that someone has been secretly living in your home for years? How do you ever feel safe in your own space again when you know someone was there, watching you, studying you, preparing to replace you? And most terrifying of all, if we hadn't discovered Rachel's financial crimes, how long before Amanda would have successfully implemented her plan to gradually become me? Have you ever felt like someone knew too much about your personal routines? How would you react to discovering someone had been living secretly in your home? What would you do if you found out someone had been practicing being you with the goal of replacing you entirely? The network Rachel had built was more extensive than anyone had imagined, and as the FBI investigation expanded, we were about to discover that my case was just one part of a much larger operation targeting multiple victims across several states. Thanks so much for watching. I can't express enough how much your support means. The likes, the comments, it all really helps the channel grow. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to hit that like button and share your thoughts in the comments below. I always take the time to read them. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss out on any new videos. See you next time.